Hello and welcome to this Tuesday edition of FreightWaves Now. I'm your host Anthony Smith, and coming up, Donny Gilbert is going to give us an update for the brokers. We also have Andrew Cox back with us with a Schipper update, but first we're going to go to Strickland with a carrier update brought to you by PowerFleet. Stay tuned.
Hello everyone and welcome to this carrier update presented by PowerFleet. I'm Strickland, and today let's look at those freight volumes going up. We are still on this upward trajectory of outbound tender volumes in the United States. 11,094, the highest value since June of 2018. So June of 2018, again, probably the peak of the freight market of all time in terms of volume. Again, we only have the outbound tender volume index for the United States since March 1st of 2018, so we can't go all the way back, but we can pretty much assume that this is one of the highest points in the freight market in terms of overall volume of all time, just looking at historical values outside of probably prior to the last 10 years. So what does this mean? What does this mean for carriers? We're not expecting this to last forever, obviously. So, when does this start to turn over? It hasn't turned so far. Volumes are still going up pretty significantly. Looking at our import data from last week, we still import volumes in terms of customs shipments, et cetera. This is what this is right here. Our customs data has fallen off a trough at the end of February again, and just in timing with Chinese New Year. A lot of those ships sailing, empty. They're reducing capacity, et cetera, coming off of China because of the coronavirus and Chinese New Year. Well, it looks like we probably would have troughed out about here if it were just Chinese New Year, but then coronavirus probably has pushed us another 12,000 shipments a day lower from China to the United States. China is of course 22% of the overall import volumes, not right now, but this is not troughed out yet, which means that at some point those volumes will probably dry up in the inventories. But in the meantime, looking at the overall volumes in the United States, it is a map of green on the tree map of the outbound tender volumes. The real point of this map is, again, to show everyone just how many markets, where roughly 75% of the market is showing an increasing freight volume week over week. Some of these markets, such as Nashville, of course, they had the tornadoes a week ago, which may be impacting the freight market there. New Orleans was having actually a relatively strong February, coming into what we're seeing right now. So it's probably having a little bit of a normalizing effect. But again, most of the United States seeing increasing freight volumes. Looking at the largest freight markets in the United States, Ontario, again, one of the bellwethers for what we're looking for in terms of overall freight volume related to import volumes, showing a 19% increase week over week. The second largest market in the country, Atlanta getting in on the action, 10.8% up. Now, Dallas, a market that has not been that active over the last year or so, really picking up on the outbound tender volume, taking over Harrisburg, Pennsylvania for the third largest outbound market in the United States, having a 24.8% increase in overall volumes. Again, this was a large market to begin with, so a 25% increase week over week is nothing to sneeze at. These are big percentage jumps. Looking at the biggest markets in the country, you can see how is it impacting capacity. So looking at this green here on our market volatility map, you can see a strong increase in tender rejections out of Ontario going up to 5.59%. Dallas, Texas, again, going all the way up to 4.2%. Not a huge amount of tender rejection rate. You can see that we're not seeing the same level of rejection that we would see sometime around a holiday period, such as Christmas or, say July 4th, which is the two biggest peaks of the freight market in general in terms of tightening capacity. That's because we're entering March. Carriers have been ramping up and getting their drivers back on the road. We've come out of the lull period. Everybody's ready. They're more ready, I should say, for this freight volume increase, but still we're seeing tender rejection rates kind of peak up outside of seasonality here. So it definitely be something to watch on the spot market moving forward. Stay tuned for FreightWaves for any more updates on what's going on with the coronavirus.
The comprehensive logistics offerings from PowerFleet cover in-cab ELD, fleet management, trailer tracking, cargo monitoring, and tracking other assets such as chassis and intermodal containers. Power up your operations with PowerFleet.
Good morning, everybody. Donny Gilbert here, going to talk to you, give you an update on your brokerage situation for this Tuesday. We've all heard Zach talk about, we've seen volumes pick up all across the country. Many markets seen increases 10, 15, 20% in some of our largest markets. And for, as a broker, we look more, we want to kind of look more at the rates of what's going on. So today, we're going to look at just drive-in tender rejection rates and a little bit of what's going on in the drive-in market. Here behind me, I brought up our national levels. We see where drive-in tender volumes have jumped up to nearly 8,000. And here's the big picture right here. This green line is drive-in tender rejection rates. They are currently at 7.47%. Since the 1st of March, they have increased from, here right around the 5% all the way up to the 7.47. So this is a very large increase. Here on our outbound volumes, we've seen those pick up around about 12%. So as we see these both increasing on a national level, the big question is, what markets, where are these markets that are actually increasing? So for that, I want to look at a tree map, and I bring up here our drive-in tender rejection rates, and this is a 1-week change. So we're comparing to 7 days ago so we can see which markets are actually moving. And we see a lot of green in this map. We do see some red where markets are falling down. My favorite market, Salt Lake City, has actually been declining, but you have Augusta, Maine. That market's picking up. Well, it's a large market for picking up bottled water in. You see Harrisburg, PA, Jefferson, Missouri, Eau Claire, Wisconsin, Allentown, PA. A lot of these markets right here, these are the markets that are growing, and these are the markets that you want to target right now because this is where volatility is picking up. Jumping into a couple of these markets right here, again, Augusta, Maine, jump from down here around very low tender rejection rate, jumping all the way up to 30.39%, letting us know that their spot markets in that market have jumped well above our contracted rates. Now, if you go into the Augusta, Maine market, it's going to be tough to find capacity, so you're probably going to need to look down to Boston for capacity, but it's very doable. So brokers need to up their rates in these markets. Now this incline right here that we see for both volumes and tender rejection rates, you're going to see that in a lot of markets right here. Now we're looking at the Cape here in Missouri, southern Missouri. This has a very large producer in this market that produces home goods that are currently being bought up. We see where volumes have jumped from here. They've nearly doubled from around 40 up to 77.69. This doubling in the outbound tender volumes has caused tender rejection rates to jump up to 25.25% or 26%. So again, we see where the increase in volumes has tightened up capacity and they're really pushing our spot market rates. So this is a market to jump into and really boost your rates up because you're going to have to pull capacity from other parts of Missouri right now to get these loads covered. Last but not least, here we're going to look at Harrisburg, PA. Again, we see our outbound tender volumes jumping up to 334. This is one of the biggest markets in the U.S. right now. And this huge straight up line from March 1st going all the way up to 12.49%. Now, for Harrisburg, PA, 12.49% isn't actually a very high tender rejection rate because of the size of the market, and especially being in the Northeast. Now, some of your freight coming out of this Harrisburg going towards Chicago and Indianapolis, those rates are probably going to be a little bit lower. But these loads that are going from Harrisburg, PA up into New York, up into Boston, Massachusetts, those rates are going to be jumping up really high, and that's where you need to increase your rates. Thank you for tuning in, guys, and that's your brokerage update for Tuesday.
Voices from every corner of the supply chain concerning all modes of transportation. From the world's largest logistics podcast network, this is what the Freight Tech Revolution sounds like. Freightcast presented by FreightWaves. Subscribe now wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to Shipper Update. I'm here with Andrew Cox. Andrew, what do you have for us today?
Hey Tony, today we're talking a little bit about this positive momentum we're hearing from a lot of the maritime carriers that are moving freight from China to the U.S. So this is maritime shipments, or customs data, excuse me, from China to the U.S. This kind of gives us our yearly averages, and you can see on a normal Chinese New Year that volumes are cut in about half. That's what Zach mentioned earlier, but you've seen this year we've actually dropped another 30% from that. So that gives you kind of an understanding of where volumes have already dropped to from now. But the factories did get online about 2 weeks ago. They became up and running. But the reason that a lot of this freight hasn't been moving is because of the drayage. The drayage drivers and the capacity, a lot of them live in other parts of the country where they were still on travel restriction and on lockdowns. But you can see on the 28th of February, you see these restrictions were actually lifted. So you see an immediate jump in drayage capacity available to the shippers.
Gotcha. And so What's some of the impacts that's happening right now because of this?
Yeah, so what's happening now is that U.S. ports are already preparing for this influx of capacity that will be coming. We're hearing this positive sentiment from a lot of the maritime carriers that a lot of the ports, or the major ports at least, are getting back to normalcy, especially with this capacity back online now. So the U.S. ports are already preparing. For example, the Port of L.A. has contracted a ship to move 23,000 TEUs out of the port. We're talking distressed exports, and we're talking some empty containers that need to be moved to kind of make it easier for this goods when they hit the shore in late March. And so what this is going to happen is there's going to have you're going to have shippers really having to meet the demand that's changing in consumer behavior. Consumers are already stocking up on antibacterial wipes and on sanitizer and different things. So to meet that peak demand, you're going to have to procure more capacity. And we had one international retailer actually tell us that they're expecting an increase of 35% more capacity needed in the trucking capacity at the end of March. And this is going to happen at a time where Zach just said volume levels are up double digits, nearly 12% year over year.
Right. And so just as you mentioned, Zach just went over a lot of the outbound tender volumes and those increases there. How should shippers really prepare for something like this?
Yeah, they need to go ahead and getting in contact with their carriers. We're talking at the end of March or early April. We're going to see an influx of capacity and this is all, again, barring no nationwide kind of mass-wide quarantines of the U.S., which are still in play. But if we can weather the storm without having those, then shippers could go ahead and start talking to carriers about the end of March, about the end of April, about needing excess capacity.
Excellent. And certainly this, I'm sure, coming up Friday, we're going to go over the DHL supply chain pricing power index. So I'm really interested to see how this might play into all of that.
Yeah, man. With volumes looking like this and capacity tightening above 7%, we might have another 5-point move for the carriers.
Excellent. And Andrew, so not a lot of people already know you're a part of the Passport team, so you're going to be covering this. It's a developing situation. You guys are always putting a lot of deep dives, right?
Correct. Yeah, we've done 3 on the coronavirus already. I'm sure we'll do another one when that volume finally hits the U.S. ports. We report 3 times a week on short, kind of 4 to 6 pages. We also do one long form about once every other week. So yeah, you get a lot of content there, plus tickets to our events. So Passport is an incredible deal.
Awesome. Andrew, thank you so much. Always insightful. And thank you so much for tuning in. That's going to do for this Tuesday edition of FreightWaves Now. But the content doesn't stop here. We're always streaming around the clock on your favorite streaming platforms, including Apple TV. So check us out there. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.